All right, so welcome back to another episode of Crestview Leads. Today, I've got my good friend Nathan Boyles with me. Nathan, I'm sure you've watched every single episode of Crestview Leads.
Of course, never miss one.
Never miss a single one. No, this is a podcast here in the city of Crestview where I get an opportunity to talk to people who have had influence in my life, specifically in the area of leadership. And so when we put this list of names of people to come out to talk to me, we ran out of people.
I was not on it, is what you're saying. Yeah.
We ran out of good candidates, and so I thought, man, he's about to no longer be a county commissioner. He's got nothing to do. We'd go ahead and get him to come on out. So, no, man, I really appreciate you coming and spending this afternoon with us. I think we're going to have a good time.
Yeah, sounds fun. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, typically what we do is we're looking for a topic specifically around leadership that we talk about. But before we get started, a lot of people in the area know you. You've been here for a long time.
For better or worse.
For better or worse. But, I only got like 3 friends. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. So right now you're county commissioner, you own Adams Sanitation, but tell us about, the things maybe that we don't know. Where are you from? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm actually a local boy, kind of born and raised in this area. Family moved around a little bit when I was young, but ultimately settled and went to Baker High School.
Right.
That's where I met Crystal, my wife. We were high school sweethearts.
Nice.
And so I went off, got an engineering degree. Not a whole lot of folks know that because I never was a practicing engineer.
Right.
And then, bumped from that to law school. Came back to downtown Crestview and renovated a little building using a credit card and opened up a law practice. Was wholly unqualified, but that was our start. Yeah.
Very cool. So my favorite part about you opening or doing some work on Main Street is, how much you loved your experience with the city of Crestview.
It was good. So I came from a background, love my grandpa, love my uncle. They permits weren't really a thing that I was ever taught that you actually have to get if you're going to do work on your own property.
It's kind of like sport, right? You just tried to get by without it.
Yeah. So we kind of had the whole front of the building torn off,
right.
And the building official at the time stopped in and said, "Man, I've been looking the other direction every time I come through this stop sign, but you just tore the whole front of the building off. You have got to come to City Hall and get a permit." So, that was my first experience with it, but it was actually a good one.
It was a good one. Yeah, no, good deal. So wait, let's back up just a minute. So you said you went to engineering school. Was that at Florida State?
It was at Florida State.
All right,
yeah.
I didn't know they had an engineering program.
Well, they kind of do. It's a joint program with FAMU. So,
okay, all right. So you went and got your engineering degree at Florida State, and then jumped to law. So how does that happen? If you could take here's the best part of that story. So I was standing on Main Street the other day talking to the builder, and we were trying to solve a problem on Main Street that had to do with some accessibility into the Great Tropical Palm.
Yes.
And we bumped up against some problems with the engineer and the lawyer. And so we decided that engineers and lawyers are the primary stop to any good idea. So now you're both?
Yeah, no, you're totally correct about that too. Yeah, so when you are an engineering student and you're not actually smart enough to be an engineer, you think real hard about an exit strategy, and then you realize that to be a real engineer, you have to actually then go practice and then take another test.
Right.
And so if you do the math, you can actually just pivot to law school, graduate, get a law degree, pass the bar, and be a practicing lawyer faster than you can be a practicing engineer. That was the extent of my capabilities of math, was to add those years up and go, yep, I'm out.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
So
also says something really terrible about the field of law that you can,
Well, listen, I have said before, this podcast is already going to have me in all kinds of trouble, and we've only been talking for about 2.5 minutes. But I have made the joke before that I know a whole lot of lawyers that went to law school. I don't know any lawyers that went to law school and didn't pass the bar, but I know a lot of engineers that went to engineering school and didn't get their PE.
Well, because you can take it 5 times. If you fail, you just keep going. So
I just want to take the bar. I think it would be fun.
You'd probably pass it.
Oh gosh, that's a scary thought. No, so
no, it is. Actually.
Came back home, opened up a law practice, did a lot of title work. Right?
Yeah.
Did some legal education for the city council. Didn't you put a law book on as a hat?
Once or twice, yeah. I was that guy in the audience, losing their mind and berating the city council back in the day. Yeah, those people that we can't stand now. I was one of those.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome, because I did hear a rumor that you showed up one time with a legal book on your head.
I did. I put it on my head, and I think it was something to the effect of you can't absorb it by osmosis. You actually have to read it.
That's fantastic.
I was probably a jerk.
Yeah, that's so funny. That's too funny.
They probably also had earned it back then.
They might have earned it. Who knows? Okay, so opened up law practice, run for county commission. Was that your first elected position?
It was, yeah. First run at elective office. I was like 27 when that race started, so also wholly unqualified to be in that role. But it was
the only qualification necessary is winning, right?
That's right. You have to be 18. I think maybe not a felon, and you have to live in the district that you're going to represent. That's about it.
And win, yeah.
Yeah, and win. Yeah.
You
get
had
more votes than the other person.
Quite a few candidates that year.
So it was a 4-man race, and I was the I guess what you would say, the underdog at the time. It was I was running against some really good qualified guys, some city council member from Fort Walton, city council member from Niceville, good folks. The time in Okaloosa County was a time where I think the citizens were looking for change. They had the Mark Bellinger kind of TDC scandal had broke, and I think being young, I represented running that, look, you would not want 5 of me up there, but you might want 1 of me to kind of push with new ideas, a different take. And then if it's a really crap idea, which many of them were, that there would be some gray hair up there to go, yeah, listen, kid, that's not a good idea.
So let's start honing in on that, because that's one of the things that, honestly, as a friend of yours, that's super fun for me to watch you do. And that is that you have no problem whatsoever being the lone man out on a particular topic, right? Especially in local. No, seriously. So like, what is it about that you think draws you to it? So an example would be if sometimes things just are running through the process in government where everybody's saying approves it, and then all of a sudden Commissioner Boyles goes, hold on a minute, maybe not. And starts asking questions. What is it about that?
So probably I never had any real social etiquette training. Is probably the first thing. I don't know. I always kind of took this approach of like I have my own like idea framework or decision making framework, and so I try and be, if nothing else, consistent in the application of that of issues to a certain framework. And so for me, at the end of the day, it's about being somewhat consistent in making decisions. And unfortunately, sometimes when you're in elected office, you can get into this mode of like listening to the majority that's talking to you at the moment, and you can kind of forget that we have a representative form of government, right? And so just because you have 10 people in the audience for it and 1 against it that day doesn't mean that it's the 10 that are speaking actually have the right side of the issue, right? It could be just that they're loudest or most passionate. And so I just kind of early on adopted the view that I was going to vote my conscience, and I love that, and let it go where it goes. And it's these are not life and death things most of the time at the end of the day, and they're not worth they're not worth compromising your positions either. We should be able to do that, right? I think I saw just before I got elected with the county commission in particular, it was 5-0 on everything, and I think the public really kind of can become very skeptical of that type of governing, and they kind of wonder what's going on in the background. And so I think it's healthy to kind of show that disagreement or have that debate. And maybe some people don't.
What's interesting about that, because for me, when that topic comes, of course, I'm on the other side, right? I'm on the staff side of that. So when that topic comes up, my first, because I've had council members come to me and say, hey, I don't think it's a good idea that we're always voting, that everybody always votes the same way. And I say, okay, well, what do you not like about the topic? And he's like, well, it's not necessarily that. I just don't think I don't think the optics are great. And so I'm like, well, wait a second. Maybe we're just bringing good ideas, right? And so then how do you, that's not always the case, clearly. And it's impossible, I think, to get, in our case, it's the same as the county's, five people that are going to think exactly the same all the time is pretty unlikely. But like, how do you know, when it's that, or for you, you're saying that you vote your conscience every single time, so it just doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, certainly, I have learned as I've aged a little bit more about this kind of the need for compromise at times. And so a lot of times for me, it's in part maybe just about kind of airing, the devil's advocate position, right? Like to make sure that we are, at least everyone is understanding that issues are sometimes, more complicated, and that you do need to show that other side. Sometimes for me, honestly, it's making sure staff knows that I'm paying attention, right? Like, because you can get in that mode too.
I love that.
Is it, things just tend to kind of flow. We have no different than the city. It's
Sure.
not uncommon to have 1,000 pages on our agenda.
Right.
50 to 70 items. And so it's always been important for me to do the job well, but then to also, I think you can raise the overall level of quality if folks do know that there's some checks and balances and somebody's paying attention.
Yeah. So Patrick Lencioni wrote a book. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to read it. We teach it here, and I actually teach it here. I've taught it at some other places, but it's this idea that there's 5 different attributes that are in any organization, and if they're done well, then the team will then the organization will be healthy. But if they're not, then the organization will be dysfunctional. And the first layer of that is trust, and I'll skip over that pretty quick because it's not what I want to chat with about. But basically, it's trust in the form of vulnerability. So, like the leader in the organization has to be vulnerable enough that his team can approach him and contradict him, or those kind of things, or be vulnerable enough that the team can see him fail. Like we were joking about the comments made to the council and all that, and you were saying, maybe I was wrong when I made those comments. Well, that's that level of vulnerability and the trust. But the next one is conflict. And so it says if organizations don't have the proper amount of conflict, if you don't create an environment where conflict can occur, then the organization will be dysfunctional. And so what that's talking about is like in a place where everybody doesn't think it's okay to have some form of disagreement, then you're going to have an organization that ends up with groupthink, or worse yet, everybody's going to give consensus and just basically say, yeah, we all agree with you, and then go off and not. Or the appropriate way is to go through the conflict. And the cool thing about that particular lesson is that what it says is that in an organization, we're not seeking consensus. I don't want everybody to agree. What I want everybody to do is to agree to go with the decision, and which means consent. And so in order for them to agree to go along with the decision, there has to be healthy conflict.
Right, which builds trust in the decision that was made, right?
That's right.
And I think that's a huge, so that groupthink type of mentality is, the risk is even greater when you talk about an elected body, right? Because the cameras are rolling and people don't want to feel stupid. And so they're sometimes even afraid they may be thinking a concern, but they're afraid that they might be an outlier on that. And so they won't raise that concern. And that's why, honestly, after 12 years on the county commission, I hope if I leave the commission with nothing else, kind of with a little bit of a legacy, it is that model of, let's have healthy debate. It is okay to be wrong. What I have found is oftentimes I've raised an issue, and then all of a sudden I have fellow commissioners going, that's an excellent idea, or I'm glad you mentioned that. I had thought it, but I didn't want to ask it.
Right.
And you can sometimes, it's not that the issue, that the recommended motion is not okay, but sometimes it's just about making it a little bit better, right? Like a slight course correction that can end up really being a positive thing. People should be able to do that. On the flip side, when my fellow commissioners are able to do that, it is not infrequently where I go, you know what, that's an excellent point, and I'm glad you brought it forward. Yeah. Let's shift our course a little bit.
And a lot of that's because we all have different upbringing. We all have different unconscious bias. Things that shaped who we were as we came up. Unconscious bias is not always bad. A lot of it just has to do with the way we're raised dictates a lot of the things that we like, a lot of the things that we don't like, but also the lens in which we see the world. And so if we all have a little bit of a different lens, then it's cool. But so I want to get off of government for just a little bit, because really the cool part of what you do is that you're an entrepreneur at heart all the time, right? So you love the idea of running a business, owning a business, doing business type stuff. So you go to engineering school, you go to law school, you open up a law firm, you do title work, and then you get out of law work and go into the garbage business. Yes. How does that happen?
Well, so I guess at the first, so I started, the entrepreneurial thing's kind of always been, I think, kind of ingrained in me. My first business was probably like at 11.
Right.
So, my grandpa was a junk seller, right? So he taught me to, and would take me as a very young kid to go to yard sales, and we'd buy stuff. And then I actually had my own booth at the old Crestview flea market when I was like 12. Yeah. And so that always just was kind of ingrained in me. And so I've carried it forward. I had a vending machine business, owned a winery at some point. So I have this whole trail of failed ventures along the way that I think kind of helped condition me to be really interested in just entrepreneurship and
right.
one, I think it just trips a trigger for me that I very much enjoy. Two, at a very practical level, the notion of being able to do something that is building something up that can be beneficial for my family, right? Like, there's this notion of, I can either sell an increment of my time, or I can work to build a type of thing that sustains itself and produces a benefit.
Okay, so I want you to tease that out. I can either you said I can either sell an increment of my time, or I can build something worth something for my family.
Yeah, for sure.
So tease that out. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so there's a great quote out there, and I'm not going to get it right, and I can't even.
It doesn't matter. Nobody will know.
But the idea is, like, I would rather have 1% of the increment of 100 men's effort kind of working together collectively, right? Than 100% of my own effort. And so the idea is that, it's, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Right.
And so it many times throughout my life, I have invested tremendous amounts of time or effort in a way that directly produced no return for me,
Right.
And our trash company is a great example. For the first 3 or 4 years, out of, I think we're approaching 7 now, we literally took nothing out. I had earned no paycheck,
right.
but put in 40 to 60 hours a week. And it was laying a foundation, and it was putting in some effort that, what we saw the vision would be to ultimately be able to produce a greater return in the future.
Right. So how do you pick those projects that you find value in? So one of the things I try to get my team, and actually Jayla's in here with us today videoing, and I was picking on her about, what do you want to do? She's about to graduate. And so what do you want to do?
Don't go to law school.
Don't go to law school. What do you want to do when you get out of school? Are you going to come back? And so we were talking, and I was trying to help her understand, or from my perspective, that it's so important to pick a purpose over a project. In other words, whatever you choose to do, make sure that what you choose to do adds lasting value. Is it going to make a lasting impact? Are you going to impact people, help people reach their full potential? And then the money comes. Do it well, work hard at it, and the money will come. So how do you pick the things that you invest in?
So, that's an interesting
Invest
question.
your time in.
Yeah, I think, one, it's got to be something that you just intuitively enjoy, right? If it's something that is not interesting to you, then it's not going to be fun. And if it's not fun and engaging for you, eventually you're going to wear out on
right.
it.
Right.
Really beyond that, I don't know that I have a whole lot of good advice. For me, it's one of those things, either it felt good or it didn't.
Right.
The trash company was one of those that I, with an engineering background, I had, done civil engineering, and so I understood kind of the solid waste system. That stuff was interesting to me. I represented a number of rural water utilities in my my brief law career, and so I enjoyed kind of the utility model of a business, really. And so I kind of saw something between those two things with a trash company that was appealing to me. And so I felt like it's something that I could put energy into, that would be engaging for me, and be an opportunity to grow something. One
of the things that's cool for me about it is that I know that how we leave this place, how we, from an environmental perspective, how we leave this earth is important to both you and Crystal. And so being in the solid waste business, you've got an opportunity to do that well, in probably what is some of the highest risk area for our environment, right? So how we handle, how we collect, how we pick up, how we dispose it, do we recycle, how do we recycle, all that stuff. Does that play into the long-term? How does that play into the long-term goals for the organization?
Well, yeah. So for me, it's actually that's always been a super interesting area. So the things that people pay no attention to, right? And we know this in government. People just want their toilet to flush. Well,
right.
Where does that go? Right? How do we keep it out of our rivers? Right? And people don't really like to think about those things. To me, those kind of big systematic issues or challenges are super interesting to me. And I do care very much, that we leave the place a little better than we found it. Yeah. And I think, the solid waste industry is no different, and it's rapidly evolving right now.
Right.
And so that is really interesting to me, some of the kind of the new technologies that are coming online. And some of those you have to be really patient for, right? You can see the potential in some technologies, but to turn the ship on systems that are as mature as those are really takes time. But for me, it is absolutely one of those things that is super engaging. And recycling is an excellent example where that industry is just going through monumental shifts and is getting better and will be better in the future. And so that makes it an exciting place to be.
Yeah, one of the things you and I talked about in your role as the county commissioner was and you're going to have to help me remember, but it was a process that would help to power the Air Force Base by processing solid waste.
Yeah.
How's it, so now you're in a role where that might actually impact what you do every day. A little bit about it. What was it?
Yeah. So, I mean, we for hundreds of years, we've been dumping our debris in a hole in the ground,
right?
And then we cover it up. And so for much of our human history, we didn't produce very much debris. And the reality is nowadays we produce tremendous amounts of waste on a per person, per pounds per day. It's unbelievable the amount of waste that we produce. And at some level, that's not ultimately sustainable. It is near-term sustainable, but at some point it's not ultimately sustainable. Right. Not least of which because those resources are then not recoverable, right? They're lost at that point once you put them in a big hole and cover them up. And so resources are not infinite, and our population continues to grow. And so, that particular model was to take that material and to basically to process it into a new material that is combustible, that could be burnt at high temperature to produce energy. Right. There's this notion of energy resiliency for some of our bases, which is a really cool issue that they need to be able to, Herbert Field needs to be able to operate 24/7 no matter what. Just because Florida Power and Light may, lose power, those folks out there are doing, things that are critical to our national defense 24/7. And so it was that's where you kind of get to see this really neat connectivity between what are we doing with our trash that's coming from the city of Crestview and how are we supporting national security and our folks down on Herbert. Right. And there's some really cool opportunities there. None of that has materialized, but if we're not thinking about those things and working towards them, then we'll just keep doing the same things over and over.
Very, very, very cool. Yeah, I remember having that conversation thinking, man, that would be great. Not really sure how we're going to make it happen, but it'd be super good. All right, so we're getting towards where we're running out of time. I got a couple of questions I always like to ask everybody. I'm going to start with this one, and I didn't prepare you for it, but if you could pick somebody in your life, a leader that had a tremendous amount of influence on you or influence on you in some way, who would that be? Positive influence, and who would that be and why? Like, what about them made them a good leader for you or somebody you wanted to aspire to be?
So that's I'm gonna take kind of two bites at this. So don't be flattered here, but honestly, you're someone who over the last few years I have really enjoyed kind of watching and learning from. And so, the way that you have been able to work and, don't get the big head here. You had a team, right? Yeah. And so there's been some
I just want to clarify you're not getting paid for this.
Yeah. Well, listen, there's, I watched, going back to that statute book on my head, I became interested in local government by watching really bad decisions being made at City Hall in Crestview.
Interestingly enough, not in Crestview, but that is why I got in government as well.
Yeah. I think, government is important to the lives of people, and it can either really be a good thing or it can be a really bad thing.
Right.
And I'll just say my personal opinion is that in the city of Crestview, it was in a very bad place, a very stagnant place, and something had to give. And I remember talking to you when you were interviewing for the job. It had been newly created, a charter change had been pushed through. And I remember thinking, I hope he gets the job, but I hate it if he does because there's going to have to be a sacrificial lamb, was my opinion. The system, in order to get the change, no one could survive being the first one in.
Right.
And I'll be damned, you have survived. And so, we've had the chance to work pretty closely together, but I have just been impressed at the way you have been able to kind of systematically turn the organization. You're not done yet. No offense, there's still some work to be done.
No, for sure.
But so honestly, you're probably the first one that comes to that list. More on a kind of at a personal level, just kind of influence for me. A couple of my family members, but I spent a lot of time with my grandpa growing up, and he didn't lead any big organizations or have any fancy titles or any roles. Pretty simple fella. But I learned a lot of life lessons from him along the way, and honestly, just kind of a little bit of the kind of the stick to it, maybe the hard head kind of, which is, I always have felt like for me, I've never felt kind of super smart or super talented, but I've always felt like I had a really hard head. And so, once I put my mind to doing something to endure the pain and just kind of push through. And so, yeah, I don't know if that was a satisfactory answer.
No, it's fantastic. I always, my favorite answers to that question are those ones that didn't necessarily run some big organization. For me, it's definitely my father. My father had a 9th grade education, went into the Air Force because, that's all he could do at the time. He could get in without a GED, ended up getting it later on in life. Spends 25 years in the military, entrepreneur the whole time, owns a car dealership and all this kind of stuff, but scratched and clawed his whole time. And so but the thing about it is he taught me how to get up every morning, go to work, only let the people that really matter speak into your life. And so, like in our role in government, there's so many people that want to speak into our lives.
Everybody.
But if you're not in, so I tell my team this too now, if you're not in a place I want to be, I'm not going to let you talk to me. If you're talk into my life, if you're sitting on your mom's couch and you ain't got a job and you're clicking on Facebook and trying to tell me how to do traffic engineering, you don't get to talk into my life because you're not in a place that I think is going to make us better. And I learned that from my dad. Now he didn't, he didn't move up in rank in the Air. He spent 22 years in the Air Force and got out just about how he came in because he was a little brass, not unlike the two of us, told people what he thought about him. But what I learned from him is you're going to be tough and you're going to get up every day. And even if you can't outsmart him, you're definitely going to outwork him. And so that was the deal. So that's fantastic. All right. So the last one is you've got, it's been fun for me to watch you calm down a little bit. I don't necessarily like it. I like the fiery Nathan a little bit better, but you definitely have calmed down. But if you were going to tell a young entrepreneur, or, right now we got a couple people running for elected positions that have never run for office before. So in either of those two roles, if you were going to tell somebody who's potentially moving into that type of role, what is some advice that you would give them?
Yeah, so I think, at the end of the day for me, don't fear failure. Like, you're going to fail. Like, so I have always, for better or worse, like, there are very few things I look back on and regret, right? Like, right. I've learned a tremendous amount. So, some of my biggest failures are those things that ultimately kind of inform future decisions. So for me, the biggest failures are the best opportunities to learn. So good. And you can't, you won't get very far if you're not willing to take a risk and acknowledge that I might fail doing this, whether it's trying a new business venture or whether it's running for elected office and putting yourself out there, which I give anyone who's willing to do that tremendous amount of credit, because it is not an easy thing to subject yourself to. And it is a very public failure if you don't win. And so it takes thick skin to do that. But I think that is a necessary component to being certainly a successful entrepreneur, is to be willing to fail. Now, don't be stupid, right? If you can help it.
Make good decisions.
Right. But those things come with inherent risk, and that's okay. And it is absolutely okay to fail, and you pick yourself back up and you go look for the next opportunity to give it another go. Yeah,
I've been asked this a couple of different times over the course of my career. I had a construction company, lost it in 2008, went through some struggles in that. Spent a lot of time making sure everybody got paid and not taking any money home towards the end of that deal. And so we were, that was tough. Those were hard times. And so people are like, oh, would you do that again? Or would you not make that decision if you could? Those are the things that form us, man. The things that we went through in that period are what strengthened my marriage. It strengthened my family, and it made sure that I'm never going to put us as a city or me or anybody in a situation where we get in the same type of situation that I had to survive through before. So that those tough times are the best learning experiences, right? Yeah. We just wish you didn't have to have them, but they definitely are.
Yeah, and I think it just doesn't. To me, it's never served me to carry regret, right? Like, it is okay to be reflective, and I've gotten better about being reflective and kind of learning. Okay, what could I have done better there? What lessons do I need to take from that? I think that is super important. But to look backwards and then, you know, kind of try and rehash. Life is short.
It's too short.
It doesn't serve you.
For sure. Well, man, I appreciate you taking time to come hang out with us. We're definitely bumping up against the timeline. The girls are giving me the signal, telling me we're done. So, again, thank you so much for coming out. For those of you who watch it, please like and subscribe. It's on all of the podcast platforms as well as Facebook, and you can get it on our on the City of Crestview website. So check us out again and have a good day.